Bruce is unique to anyone that I've met in my life, and you look at the contribution to the Essendon Football Club over the history of the club and the 150 years, and I don't think it would have been the place it became both on the field and off the field without Bruce Reid. Bruce wasn't just a doctor, he was a storyteller. He passed down the great history of the club from generation to generation from the time he got there. And he cared for so many great players. And I think that if you look at the last 40 or 50 years and the Kevin Sheedy era, Sheeds obviously stands out as the key contributor, but Bruce Reid is not far behind. And I've no doubt that we wouldn't have been such a great club without Bruce, both on and off the field. And I don't think we would have won the 4 premierships in that Kevin Sheedy era without Bruce. He's not just a doctor, but he was a mentor, a great friend. And as I said, a storyteller who passed down the fabric of the club from generation to generation of players. Reedy was always a scallywag. He was always playing tricks out on the training track, and he'd come in and off the track. But the one thing with Bruce is he hated being in the medical room when training was on, because he thought he had a bit of a keen eye for the players and who should play, who shouldn't play. So he'd be out here most nights watching training and talking to Sheeds, making sure the cameras were on him. You know, he loved a good bit of camera work and loved being in the paper the next day. So he'd always stand very close to Kevin Sheedy. But just to look out on the ground and the amount of fitness tests I did with Reedy, goal kicking competitions, and then underneath this stand, the great times we had during training and after training. And I think when you're building a football club, you want people to have genuine care in your club. And it's all about high performance, it's all about playing well, and what the supporters see, and rightfully so, is the performance on a Saturday or on a Friday night, and winning grand finals or whatever it is. But to build that culture, you need people who genuinely care for players, and the coaches need to genuinely care. And in Bruce Reid, we had someone who genuinely cared about his players. It wasn't just a 9-to-5 job or 2 hours at the club. He would be on the phone all night, every night if he needed to. He'd go to players' houses if he needed to. And when you have someone around the club who genuinely cares for you, and then cares for your wife, and then cares for your kids, it makes you feel stable, secure, and want to play for that club. So I think that the major characteristic that Bruce had was a genuine care for players. And then he made it fun. Like, he actually made it fun. It was fun to come to the club and hang out with Reedy. The amount of times that we'd sit down in the old medical room here on a cold, wet July night after training and just talk and just laugh. And he'd tell stories about Van der Haar and Paul Vander. He loved Paul Vander. Like, the amount of stories he'd tell about Vander and the scallywags at the footy club. And he'd encourage the next level of scallywag, the McVeighs, the Solomons, the Ramanaskas. He'd sort of put a bit of the Van der Haar or Glenn Hawker into those guys. And so this is a guy that wasn't just worried about whether your foot was good or your hamstring was good. He was trying to make you a better person and a better footballer as well. There are a lot of stories about Bruce that talk about the quality of person he is. I think the one for me is there's a number of stories about when we lose and we don't play well, and he'd come around the rooms and make sure everyone was feeling good. Even a quarter time, half time, you weren't playing well. He'd be medically attending to you, but also trying to get in your brain to get you up to play better. So it was more than just a doctor. He was very much a psychologist, or he thought he was. He's sorely missed as a human being, a great human being. And as a doctor, he was incredible. I think one of the things you want as a player when you get injured or you're sore is you want to have confidence in your doctor. You want to know that he's going to be right 95% of the time. And with Reedy, we had that. If Reedy said you had this, you had it. If Reedy said you're going to be okay, you're going to be okay. And very occasionally did he get that wrong, and that was a really great attribute for him to have, along with his care and humour and the other side of things. And if you talk about a Hall of Fame person, there's no one more befitting of that than Bruce Reid, because he gave so much to this club, and there's so many players who wouldn't be the players they are physically because of him, but mentally. Like, the confidence he gave me as a player was huge, and I owe a lot to him as a human being and as a footballer. I just want to mention to Judy, Elise, Curtis, Thomas, Abby and Woody, who hopefully are there tonight, what a wonderful father and person and human being your dad was. And you should be so proud of him. I know you're proud of him. It's not just about sport and about football, but he would talk about you guys all the time. The stories he'd talk about you guys, Judy was always at the forefront of his brain. And yeah, he loved this place and he did so much for this place, but I do have to say that his family was first, and you know, if you're there, you should be so proud of your father and your husband, because he's a wonderful man.